I am ready to start if you are Janu and Dr. Randa. Thank you guys so much for coming today. Again, heads up, we are recording this whole call. We will be sharing it with you. We're also streaming it on Clubhouse, which is really exciting. So again, wherever you can join, we want to make this as easy for you guys as possible. And anybody who wants this call after, like, we'll definitely share that with you by email. But yeah, so a little bit about today's event and Dr. Randa. I want to introduce you. I had the pleasure of meeting you a little while ago through my wonderful friend Kiara. But a little bit about yourself. So Dr. Randa is originally from Lebanon. She's one of the few eye surgeons to rank in among the top 1% in vision correction, having trained at Harvard Medical School for refractive surgery. On top of medical school, she also completed a research fellowship at Georgetown for corneal wound healing. When she's not a LASIK surgeon, she works as an entrepreneur and recently co-founded a production company, Vox Films. I want to give you the chance to introduce yourself. If I didn't mention anything or you want to add anything, go ahead.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This is such a wonderful opportunity. Yes, my name is Randa Garrana. I definitely both. I am an MD and I'm an entrepreneur, all wrapped into one. And my journey definitely started. Well, let's see, how many years ago was that? Several years back when I decided to apply to medical school and get my training in the United States. And so it wasn't easy, obviously. We all know it's even hard if you've gone to undergrad in the US to get into medical school. And but I think I was determined. First, I wanted to leave Lebanon because there was a war going on. And it was like, I wanted to live. I didn't want to die.
Yeah.
And so it made me work 10 times as hard. I got in and that there began the journey. And I think PreMed in itself is obviously its own challenge and its own experience. And if you survive PreMed and you get into medical school, you think that, yay, now I'm in, I don't have to worry. Well, let me tell you, you better buckle up, because not only is medical school, being a medical student is hard because you're overwhelmed by the total number of credits you have to carry every year, because you're studying the whole entire human body in 2 years. Because the other 2 years, you do 2 years basic science. At least when I did it, it was 2 years of basic science and then 2 years of clinical rotations. And basic science was I have to tell you, thank God for coffee and whatever else that kept me up, because 24 hours in the day was not enough. I mean, I couldn't go to any social event. Like, my family would have Sunday lunches and I'm like, I can't, I'm so behind. So surviving the first 2 years was, I don't even know how I did it. But then, you start your clinical rotations and you feel like, oh my God, I'm wearing a white coat. Finally, that's like the moment I've been waiting for.
Exactly. So we have a bunch of questions prepared. I want to give Janu the chance to start asking that. But before doing that, we're bringing two organizations together. So I want to introduce both of them really quickly. I used to be in PhiDe, the organization that Janu runs. So it feels really full circle to do this event together. I started the NYU mentorship program because when I switched to doing economics and computer science, I really felt like there was a need to hear from people in industry like Dr. Randa and hear the stories and live stories of people that have moved way past the stage that we are today, and really support us through our time at NYU. And I can't wait to hear more about that through your story today. But I want to hand it over to Janu to introduce PhiDe.
First, I just want to say thanks to Nithya for organizing not only this event, but the mentorship program that she's worked so hard on. And I think that has given us the opportunity to talk to so many executives like Dr. Randa. Before we start, I did, for anyone who joined a little bit later, just to tell you more about PhiDe. It is a pre-medical organization on campus, as I was talking about earlier, and it helps with professional guidance, mentorship, resources for students who want to go to medical school, and creates a sense of community among pre-med students in a very like competitive atmosphere that we try to survive in, as Dr. Randa was mentioning earlier.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Janu. That's very kind of you. We want to start with questions that are again related to the medical journey. I have so many questions about the entrepreneurial work that we've done, and then we're going to leave time at the end for questions. But if you have any questions during the call, feel free to send them in the chat, or again, message me and Janu. We'll be checking our phones and chats and whatever during the call. But Janu, take it away with your first question. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I thought the best first place to start in asking you about your medical career was just from the roots. So, what inspired you to become a physician, and what were the experiences you had that really verified or shaped that interest and made you think, oh, yeah, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, and I want to commit so many years to this profession?
Okay, thank you for asking that question. That's a very important question. I was, I was when I was little, I think I got very ill once. I got like what we call a nephritis, which is an inflammation of the kidney, and I must have been like maybe 7, and I couldn't walk, and my grandma, God rest her soul, told my mom we have to take her to the emergency room because I couldn't walk anymore. I was crying all the time. So they took me to the emergency room, and I was, I was so scared of needles. I mean, obviously, when you're young and they're trying to put an IV in you, it was horrific. I'm like, no, you're not. So they have to restrain me, put the IV in. I was crying. My grandma kept pointing to this woman who is wearing, white and has a stethoscope. She's like, my grandma is like, wait, look at this lady. She's a doctor. One day you're going to be like her. So I adored my grandmother. I adored her. She was everything to me. And yeah, I mean, I grew up, I loved the arts. I loved everything about the arts. And so to me, I wanted to be an architect, or I could be a doctor. And honestly, my father is an eye doctor. He's an optometrist. He's not an MD. I wanted like the rebel in me wanted to really become an architect. And I thought I'd make a great architect. But I calculated the number of years. I'm just being very honest. And architecture was 5. And me being my silly, young, 17-year-old self, I'm like, okay, architecture is 5, medicine is 7. Come on. I mean, I want to be a doctor. It's 2 more years only. If I only knew that at the end of 7 years, if somebody dropped dead, I'd be running in the other direction because I wouldn't know how to save them. Like, it just, the beginning starts after 7 years. It's not the end, it's the beginning. So I didn't know that. So I applied, I went to PreMed, and that's how it happened.
Amazing. It's wonderful that you were inspired by an experience that you had with someone you loved so dearly, because I know that that's usually a very formative reason why people choose medicine. It's usually something personal and something within their family or their close circle. And as you mentioned, it's a long road even after the 7 years. So I wanted to know more about the challenges you faced as a pre-med student and in medical school, and how you grew from those challenges and how they've stuck with you like throughout your career as a surgeon.
So let me start by PreMed. Talking about PreMed, since your organization supports, students who are interested in becoming doctors. I have to say, PreMed for everyone is a very dark and it's a very difficult. It's a very difficult time because you come from high school, and high school is not that hard. It's really not. You're with friends that you probably know all your life. You've got activities, there's parties every weekend, and here you start PreMed, and suddenly everything you knew is different. And it was definitely an adjustment. I mean, I still remember taking my first biology course, sitting in the first row and not having enough time to write all my notes because it's like was going so fast. And I remember like a week later, we had our first exam. And I have like a book of notes about biology. It's definitely a very stressful experience. And I think anybody coming from high school, it's an adjustment. It's an adjustment. I had friends from high school who were in pre-med with me. A couple of them were very close, thank God, because everybody else is like everyone to himself. It's the survival of the fittest. Friendships are definitely not the same because we're all competing to that coveted spot, right? There's only so many spots and everybody wants in, and you can't really have close friends. I mean, thank God I had like 2 or 3 that I trusted. We studied together, but everybody else, it's like paranoia, you know? You never know like who's going to steal your notes or who's going to, it's a tough one, especially when you're young and you're not used to it. But for me, you know, it was like I decided to just me, myself, and I, you know, it was like I have to keep my eye on the ball. Like I cannot really be distracted by all the horrible things that I saw were happening, and they really, truly were not good. Like people will show their ugliest side because obviously there's only so many spots. I decided to stick to myself. And honestly, you know, my first year was the hardest. I don't think I went to one party. I didn't go to one Halloween party. I didn't go to one birthday party. I didn't go to one dancing party. It was all about study, study, study. After the second year was a little bit easier because I kind of got to know the system. Like that was the half of the challenge, is like running from building to building, trying to make it on time and trying to sit in the front. Like everybody sat in the front, like there's not enough front row seats in that big auditorium. And after in the second year, I think I started to feel like I'm comfortable, like I could do this, you know. But honestly, to each his own. Like you feel very alone as a pre-med. I don't know, Nitya, I don't know if you felt like that. You feel like you're by yourself. You've got like no life support. You're gonna have to pull yourself up by yourself. And when you're young, you know, I mean, it depends on your life experiences. When you're young, you're not really very used to going it by yourself, you know, wondering if that person that's telling you, hey, you know, chapter 17 is not in the exam. Don't worry about it. And I'm like, well, I still remember chapter 17 was in the exam. It was that bad. Honestly, it was that bad. So, and people memorized everyone's, well, that was in medical school. It's very competitive. You know, you see people's darkest side. So it's not something that I recommend anybody gets. I think to each his own. You got to be by yourself. You got to keep your eye on the ball. You got to know that this is temporary, that soon it'll be over, and you want to look back and think that you've given it your best. So
yeah, I definitely can resonate with feeling alone at times, because the way everybody studies is different, the way everybody works is different. So for you to understand something might take you 3 hours versus for someone else it takes maybe 10 minutes to grasp something. So you have to really gauge yourself, which I've been trying to learn how to do in pre-med, and having friends in PhiDe has definitely helped like build that sense of community. But I also wanted to know if in medical school, in your residency or any of the fellowships you did, if you had any very like impactful mentors who gave you good advice or steered you in the right direction in your career, and helped elevate your performance in like a really meaningful way.
I did. I had so many. I mean, where do I begin? Well, first of all, you know, I was a foreigner, and here I am. I arrived, you know, in New York City, and it was an adjustment for me, right? So I mean, I studied in English all my life. I mean, I learned how to speak English when I was in kindergarten, but obviously I do have an accent, and everybody would ask me, well, where did you do your undergrad? Well, I did it at the American University. And they'd be looking at me, it's like, where is that? You know, like, so to me, it took me a while to feel at home. But honestly, you know, after the first year, I started feeling that I am gaining people's respect. And I think with that came several mentors, and people recognize when you work hard. It doesn't matter like if you succeed or you don't. I think the respect comes from the hard work. Like if you're not working hard and you're like moping around because you didn't do very well, you're not going to get a lot of sympathy, because why didn't you put your heart and soul into it? So for me, I just like worked very, very hard. I was started to get the support of a lot of my professors. Um, and I think, you know, when I got to my clinical rotations, that's when I got the biggest support, because I mean, I was in that hospital, like, I don't think I ever left the hospital. I was in that hospital trying to like volunteer my services to everybody, even after my shift. I was, you know, I was determined to learn everything I can. I do have one of my biggest mentors was my the chairman of the Department of Ophthalmology at my residency program. His name was, God rest his soul, he was one of the most prominent um, uh, ocular neurologist in the world. He had written so many textbooks. He was so revered and so respected. And he was the most humble human being you could ever meet. He was just so inspirational. I mean, this man was, you know, was called to speak all over the world. Everybody knew who he was. Yet, you know, when you saw him walking, you'd think that he's just like anybody, you know? And so this person was a tremendous influence in how to conduct yourself as a doctor. And also, I think the admiration, I mean, I think it was mutual, because he also was an immigrant. And I think for me, you know, he kind of took me under his wing. And I did have to prove myself to him, obviously, but he was a tremendous influence in my life. I mean, I was in California when he passed away, and I took a week off, and I had to be at his funeral. I had to be, you know, he was like a family member to me. So it's important, because these people kind of influence the way you see the world, especially as a physician. You know, not every physician is the same. And he definitely influenced the way I practice and the way I think about my job.
Amazing. And I think mentorship is so important, especially in a career as rigorous as medicine. And before we switch gears, I wanted to know a little bit more about your research and why you chose ophthalmology, why you developed an interest in refractive surgery. And if you could tell us more about what you're currently working on with your research and where you hope to see it go in the long term. Because I know we have a lot of future physicians here, and a lot of them are involved with research because NYU's very research heavy, research oriented school. So I think it would be great to hear more about that.
Thank you. Thank you. This is great. I love talking about refractive surgery because and the eye, because that's what I do. One of the things I do. I do more than that. So again, I think I was a teenager when I saw on TV once this Russian surgeon in Russia taking like diamond knife into the cornea, and they had the patients like on several beds, and he was in the middle. He was like in the middle, and there were like 6 or 7 patients on stretchers around him. And he was going from one person to the other, making these radial pizza pie cuts in the cornea. If you don't know, the cornea is like that most transparent part of the eye that's in the front. And people will get up from the table and say, "Oh my God, I could see, that's amazing." I'm like, what is that? And of course, my father is an optometrist, and I'm asking my father, I'm like, well, what is this guy doing? This is so scary. Like, oh my God, he's cutting the eye. And he's like, no, it's called refractive surgery. You just kind of flatten the cornea and they can see. I'm like, huh? This is crazy. And people would get up and they would cry. And I'm like, oh my God, this is something amazing, you know? When I went to medical school, I wanted initially to be a cardiologist, because I loved the heart. I loved like the mechanics of the heart. I thought, I want to be a woman cardiologist. How cool is that? But then I did my cardiology and CCU rotation, and I noticed that everyone gets a heart attack after midnight. Like, we admitted the biggest number of myocardial infarctions after midnight. And I was thinking, like, I mean, my God, I don't want to be here after every night after midnight. I want to have a life. So I decided to go into ophthalmology, which was amazing. I loved the eye. It was very visual and it was colorful and artistic. And okay, so I went into ophthalmology, and I did corneal wound healing because, again, I wanted to know how that guy who did the radial incisions, I wanted to understand how the cornea heals and how that affected them being able to see without glasses. So I joined Dwight Kavanagh, who was one of the biggest names in corneal wound healing. And I did this research with him, studying corneal wound healing. You always want to do research based on what you like, not just because it's just any research, because research is hard. It's very, very difficult. You're looking at data. You're not a doctor anymore. You're like now looking at under the microscope at dead tissue, studying statistics, trying to understand how this happens, because ultimately it's a responsibility. You have to write a paper, other peers are going to review it, and it's going to be published, and people are going to learn from it. So you want to be honest about it, and you want to do it to the best of your ability, and you want to do it in something you like. So I did corneal wound healing because I was fascinated by that Russian guy who was doing the knife thing. But anyway, when I was in ophthalmology residency, the excimer laser was just in 1995. I started my residency, and the excimer laser was just approved in the United States. And there was this big thing about all the news channels were talking about this biggest new procedure, which was a big procedure. So then I started, studying wound healing after excimer laser, and I did it with some of my mentors that were cornea specialists in my residency program. And my goal was really to publish because it was new, it was just gotten approved, and I wanted to contribute to the understanding of how this works. So I did a lot of clinical research. At that time, patients will have it done. We would study the effect of this technique on this right eye versus this technique on the left eye, and compare the two. So you want to do research in a topic that you enjoy.
Amazing. Nithya, do you want to take over and ask more about the company and the entrepreneurship initiatives that Dr. Randa is working on?
Yeah, I can't wait to share this because it really is so interesting. I mean, hearing your journey to that has been so great for me to learn about. I want to start by asking, though, about the intersection of these two professions, whether it's writing and production and medicine. You're living between these two worlds. How do you see them complementing each other if they do, or contrasting each other when they do? How have you found your careers have merged together?
Thank you for asking that question. I actually became interested in writing all my life. I liked, I told you when I was thinking about applying, I loved the arts. I loved writing from the very beginning. If I wasn't a doctor, I probably would be a writer, a professional writer. Mm-hmm. But obviously life happens, and you get on this journey of medicine, and it really consumes you. And I got to a place in my career about 10 years ago where I had some time, and I decided, let me take some online courses about screenwriting, and some other people helped me out. And, I did the best I can, and I really wanted to write. I felt like in my journey through my life, I had a lot of great stories that I wanted to tell. And I believed that, you know, movies and television are just such a powerful tool to change people's perspective on life and on living and on humanity in general. You know, and as a doctor, I am always in that, you know, that's all I do. I mean, I'm in this field where I see patients suffering, their victory when they get better, their trepidations when they're about to go into surgery. And it stuck with me, you know, and I wanted to write stories about what I've heard and what I've seen. So I started, and then obviously when COVID happened, I had a lot of time on my hands because I happened to be in California at that time, and I couldn't come to New York, and my practice was closed. And so the world was at a standstill, and I decided, hey, you know, this is what's happening now is inspirational. I need to go back and write. And so I started writing, and I did it with a great writer. And from there, you know, the world kept getting weirder, right? Things were happening, Black Lives Matter, COVID-19, there were like things happening in the mainstream. And I didn't want to wait for my turn, you know, take a number and wait for someone to invite you to tell your story, if you are lucky and the stars are all aligned. So I decided, you know, we should do our own production company. And I had someone I was working with, and I wanted to do it with that person. And we did it. And it just, I guess it was meant to be. Because you're a doctor, it doesn't mean that you can't have any other interest, you know? Because it becomes more like medicine becomes more as, when you're young, it's everything, right? Because it's everything. When you're young, you haven't really lived very much. You've worked so hard to become a doctor. And now you become a doctor. And then through this journey of practicing, you discover humanity and life, you know, and suddenly you notice that, well, hey, there's this, there's that too. You know, this is not the only thing. And I wanted a way to combine the two. And I thought writing was a great way to do it. And so my partner and I, Chiara Miniconi, as you know, we decided to do this production company, and we decided to tell stories, great stories. So
what is your vision for Vox Films in the future? Like, how are you deciding what stories you want to share on the platform? Where do you see this company moving to in the future?
Well, this is a great time to have, by the way, this is a great time to have a production company, because as you can probably tell, no one's going to the movies. There are no blockbuster productions happening. The studios are really not making big budget movies. And for us, you know, we wanted to capitalize on great stories that are made by young and up and coming filmmakers, and give them a platform to, you know, tell their stories and showcase their talent. And really, honestly, not for shortage of talent. It's amazing. I mean, you know, I come from a field where there's really not a lot of talent. I mean, there is definitely medical talent, but not a lot of like artistic talent. And I love being surrounded by that. But Vox Films really is a platform to tell very amazing, entertaining stories, and give room for people who have been closed out of the entertainment industry. And I'm not saying, you know, we're not like a big company, but in our scale, we would like to, like, we want women to come to us, we want minorities to come to us, we want anybody who has an amazing story to come to us, because this is what we want to tell. The stories that have not been told before, and the stories that, you know, have been shut down by everyone else. You know, I mean, I had a story that was shut down, not in so many ways, but, you know,
yeah,
I mean, I'm accomplished. I've done a couple of things in my life, and for me to like sit in front of someone and just see them like quiver in their seat about something that I've written, I was like, okay. I draw the line somewhere, you know, it's like at some point you have to take initiative. I'm like, okay, you're not going to you don't want to you don't want to do it. You don't want to help me do it. Okay, fine. I'm going to do my own production company and I am going to do it. How about that? You know, and I want that to be an inspiration to everybody out there, everyone out there, like, don't ever give up, because honestly, people are going to try to drown your voice. Human nature, like there's a lot of beautiful things about humans, right? But honestly, as a woman, and I'm going to just highlight that, and all the peace and love for the men out there, I'm sure most of you are very, you know, open-minded and you love your sisters and mothers. But I can tell you, as a woman, it's very, and in medicine too. Okay, let me start by medicine. Your voice is going to drown, or they will try to drown your voice, because the culture, you know, not because they're evil, or this is the culture. If you want to be heard, you're gonna have to scream. You're gonna have to scream to be heard. And that is, honestly, this is what I did all my life. Like people would have discounted me as a nobody. I had to like work 10 times as hard to be noticed. I had to like raise my hand or raise my voice and stand up there in front of everyone and talk about, you know, the reproductive system, and talk about things that made me uncomfortable, because I wanted to be seen and I wanted to be heard. And so I didn't want someone to tell me, you can't do this. I absolutely rejected that idea. And when I had that meeting with that person, and I felt that they like the hint of, I'm never going to do that story and I'm not interested in it. I'm like, okay, I will never be in this position where I sit in front of someone and they tell me I can't do something. So I'm going to open my own production company and I'm going to do it. So let that be a message to everybody out there. Don't ever give up. If somebody tells you you cannot do it, find a way to do it. Find a way to do it. I know when you're young, you think that, oh, this is so difficult. There's no way I could do it. The truth is, it's really not. It isn't. It is. It's all in your head. Mm-hmm. Get out of your head and figure out a way. Like, it's the internet, you know, it's like we've got information now at the tip of our fingers. You can do anything and everything you want to do.
Before I ask my last question, if you guys have any questions, feel free to send them in the chat or text them separately to me and John, and we'll ask them right after this. But what I appreciate so much about what you shared just now is the mentality you have towards your work and the way that you've been able to, you know, push and jump through all of the challenges that have come your way. And there's been so many times of uncertainty, I'm sure, in your life, moving here from Lebanon, starting this company during what many are calling this incredibly unprecedented period of the pandemic. What is your greatest advice for to deal with uncertainty for young people, especially like myself? I'm a senior about to graduate college. What is the best advice you give for people dealing with that?
I believe in yourself. You have to believe in yourself. Honestly, I mean, we all have that little voice in our head, right? It's like, well, I don't know, like, what would I do? Like, if I don't get into medical school, like, what would I do? What would I do? Just believe in yourself. Believe in yourself. I think, you know, that's the one thing that I can think of. Like, I did not have doubt. I did, but I didn't. I pushed it away. It's like, I have no time for doubt right now. I have to believe that I could do it. And if you put your mind to it, honestly, mind over matter. I say that to my patients sometimes. I tell them, you know, look, and you have a bad infection. I think statistically speaking, unfortunately, you're not going to make that eye is not going to make it. But if you will yourself to heal, you will. And, you know, to be honest with you, one day I'll write a book about it, because it's true. You know, they come a week later and I'm like, oh my God, it's like, what happened? It's like, well, thank you, doctor. I'm like, no, don't thank me. Thank you. I did nothing. It was you. Mm-hmm. So just let that be, you know, whenever you are uncertain, you just have to dig deep, because it's in there. It is in there waiting, you know. Don't doubt yourself. Believe in what you want to do and give it your best. That's all you need to succeed. You don't need all the money in the world. You don't need all the connections in the world. All of these will come if you just believe that you could do it.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I just got a message from Lily. She said, honestly, Nitya, I would buy that Mind Over Matter book. So we already have our first.
I will write it. I will write it one day.
But I'm gonna hand it over to Janu if you have any questions to ask, and then I can take it back.
Yeah, I love everything we've heard on this talk so far. I think it's been really inspiring. And I wanted to know more about what you've learned from interacting with your patients and developing meaningful connections with them. And also, you work in such a specialized, difficult field. So, how do you explain difficult procedures and tasks to your patients in a way that they can understand and feel comfortable as well?
Okay, what was the first question? Because there was many. I'm just like, I don't want to miss anything, you know?
That was two at once, sorry. But I think the first was, what have you learned from interacting with your patients and developing bonds with them? And second was, how do you explain the difficulty of the surgery to them in a way that they feel comfortable?
Okay. I've learned a lot from my patients. I mean, I feel like I'm not the same person I was when I first started practicing. Um, I mean, what a tremendous responsibility when somebody comes to you and they're like kind of desperate, right? They want to see. And I always like, I used to close when I was a resident. I had a tiny, tiny studio that I could see like a sliver of the Empire State Building. I mean, a tiny, tiny piece of it at the top. And so I used to wake up in the morning just before they turn off the light, like really, really early, because I wanted to see that light. And sometimes I would just close my eyes and I would say, it's just horrible to be blind, you know? It's horrible. Like you can't see the light. You cannot enjoy, like, how is it to be living without seeing? It must be like God awful. And so when I started practicing, that stuck with me. Like these people come and they are asking for your help. Okay. It's a privilege, such an amazing privilege. And I felt like I had to like give my 110% and stand on my head to help everyone. And I've learned so much. I've learned about how resilient people can be. I gave you the example of how people heal themselves. I've learned like sometimes, you know, I really have to be a cheerleader more than a doctor. I have to be a therapist more than a doctor because I was sick at one point. You know, I was very, very sick and I was very, very scared. And I wanted my doctors to talk to me, even though I was a doctor, I wanted my doctors to talk to me as if I was a 5-year-old. I was like, I'm so scared. Just like draw it or tell me like in like baby words, because when you're sick, you're very vulnerable, you know? So I appreciate that very much when patients come to me and they have like a horrible condition and they really need help. And I, you know, I go all out. I would do anything and everything. I've learned a lot. I'm not the same person. I'm telling you, you think you know everything. You go through a career in medicine and it completely changes you, completely changes you.
That's really inspiring, and especially working in a specialization where you're helping them with the sense that they need so deeply to perceive the world. I think I can imagine how much that would have impacted you throughout your career. Nithya, do you have any other Q&A questions, or do you want me to take this one?
Go ahead. Yeah, take it away.
So you mentioned that you had a lot of mentors throughout your research, your residency, and otherwise. What was the most difficult thing that you learned from a mentor, like whether that be in surgery or in your research fellowship? Like, what was a very difficult skill that you had to learn that you needed to like unlearn some habits for?
I mean, listen, when you have a mentor, they're on a pedestal. You know, they can do no wrong. You know, they definitely are. You kind of like have an adulation to them because they are so good at what they do and they are so amazingly transparent in the way they explain things. what did I have to unlearn? That's such a great question. That's such a great question. I definitely, when you're young, you're always proud of yourself, right? You're always like, you've accomplished a few things, good for you. You deserve a little medal, I think what I had to unlearn that very quickly from my mentors, because, and especially in medicine, it's very humbling because you think you know everything. And then, the next year, you're like, oh God, I have so much to learn. I learned really to be completely on a completely different level, to be very empathetic to my patients, very, very empathetic. Because when you're a resident, you've got like 25 charts you have to go through. You have to see 25 patients. Some of them are special needs, they can't talk. You have to talk to their assistant. You have to compose in yourself the history of their disease and their ailment and how you can help them. And you look at the charts and the pile is still there. And you're like, come on, chop chop, help me out here. Some of them don't speak English. I had to learn how to speak medical Spanish, because I'm like, they would speak to me and I was like, oh, interpreter, where are you? So you just I think I learned empathy in a completely different way than I thought it was. And having mentors has been very, very helpful. Humility, empathy, understanding that you're never too good to learn. You always have room to grow. You always have room to learn. And you always have to be humble. No matter how great a surgeon you are, one day when you're doing surgery, you will fail. And you better be ready, because otherwise it'll be a blow to your ego that you'll never get over. So yeah, these are things that I've learned from my mentors, and it's been wonderful.
I had a really great question sent in that I want to ask you. It talks about balancing your passions earlier in your career than now. So at what age did you realize, you talked about how you've been a writer. When did you realize that's something that you want to be doing more seriously? And how would you recommend for a college student that maybe is interested in music or a sport or something outside of medicine? How should they go about balancing that and incorporating that into their life?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly was interested in storytelling when I was younger. I love telling a good story. And I just, the whole screenwriting thing was later in life, when I was, I think, medical student, because there were so many amazing stories, good, bad, and in between, that are happening. I'm like, I gotta write the story down. It's like one day I have to tell it, Look, life is hard, right? Because I'm also a mother. I also have 4 children. It's not like it's only me and myself with a book and a pen, But I also know that life is too short, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you're young, you think, oh, I'm going to live forever. When I was 20, I used to think that 40 was old. Like, oh my God, 40 years old, that's just old. Then you realize that the years just go by like a blaze. And so I wanted to do something I love before it was too late. And I made time. I made time. Is it easy? No, it isn't. But if you love something and it brings you joy, listen, the moments of joy are fleeting. I don't care if you're a doctor, if you're a business person, if you're a musician, if you are a secretary, if you are a coffee maker. Moments of true joy in life are very rare, and they're very few in between. And to experience that, you have to work at it. You have to make room, you have to make time. That 1 hour a week of, rather than just, I don't know, wake up at 8 o'clock, wake up at 6, you've got 2 hours, read notes. I mean, learn how to play the piano, or just read, learn how to write, or learn how to, there's always a way. I mean, I think we get overwhelmed with life, honestly, because it's busy and it's fast paced. But if you really like something, you got to make time for it. And there is time. You just have to find it.
As founding this company, what has been the most enjoyable aspect of doing all this for you?
I have to tell you, I thought that I was happy and satisfied as an eye surgeon.
Uh,
I don't know what happy and satisfied is until I started with this company. This is just like
wow.
has been, because I'm learning new things every day and working with talent, all kinds of talent, and being able to, you talk about a mentor, right? Being able to be like somehow like a little bit of a mentor, to someone who's young, who's a filmmaker, who wants to. I think it brought me so much joy. So anybody out there, if you're interested in anything other than medicine, whether you're doctors or not, please do it. Please do it, because you really never know how it will change your life. And this doing Vox Films has been amazing to me. I'm happier now than I was ever in my life, I have to say.
Wow. That is so exciting. I don't think I have any more questions on my end. Janu, do you have anything you want to ask before you wrap things up?
Yeah, I have a final question that I wanted to ask you, which is in the backdrop of the pandemic with COVID just raging on much longer than we expected, has this entire like global situation changed your perception of the medical field or how you interact with your patients, or even just changed how you think about healthcare and what you need, what you think needs to change about it?
Well, the pandemic has been an eye opener, hasn't it? Because, the one thing about medicine is like, you know that you can make a difference, but I don't think even doctors knew how much they make a difference before the pandemic. I mean, think about it. It's like the firefighter. They're running into the fire where everybody else is running out, right? So for doctors, running into this pandemic, especially in the beginning, where we didn't really know much about it, there's been so many healthcare providers, physicians that unfortunately have passed away because of COVID. Um, so, I mean, I think now everybody knows the importance of having good doctors, right? Everybody knows that we work hard. We put ourselves like when the pandemic started, I had to shut my office down for 8 weeks, I think 9 weeks. And then when I opened up, when they allowed us to open up, I was wearing like an N95 respirator with like the whole thing. Because I was worried, like we were all scared, like I didn't want to die, Um, and was it fun? No. But did I want to do it? Of course I wanted to do it. Like I had people who had like herpetic infections in their eye. They had like, I had to go and I had to see these patients. I think, listen, there's not enough doctors in the world. Definitely not enough. And I think the pandemic has proven that there isn't enough physicians. So instead of cutting down the number of spots for doctors, they need to double up the number of spots for doctors, and they need to make the education free. I think just the financial burden of medicine is just incredibly heavy. It's overwhelming. No one has that amount of money. Very few do. And so they need to make it free. And I think hopefully this pandemic will allow that to happen. Make it free so you can get the top students and double up the number of doctors, because there really is not enough. There really isn't. I hold a license in Colorado, even though I don't practice in Colorado. I was getting screaming emails from Colorado. We need doctors. We need doctors. I'm like, I can't go to Colorado. I'm in California. States were desperate. They really were. So.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's also crazy how much talent schools lose out on because of the financial burden of medicine. Just because someone can't afford it, sometimes they might not even be able to materialize their interest in being a physician, which is crazy to think about. And I definitely think the process for how they select students to receive that degree should definitely change. But yeah, on my end, I think that's about all the questions I have. Thank you so much for joining us today and offering us all your advice and insights. I'm sure everyone on the call is walking away feeling very inspired.
Thank you so much. This has been a great experience. And yeah, for everyone out there, you know what? Follow your dreams. Don't give up. Life is too short. Pursue your passions and don't give up. Thank you so much for inviting
Dr.
me.
Randa, you can't see my phone right now, but it's blowing up with everybody texting me quotes of things you said, and
Oh.
just, it's just so happy to see the response everybody's having. My phone's been like buzzing in the corner. Guys,
Thank you so much.
just thank you
you.
so much for sharing your story. We're going to send this out to all of you. I know a few people have already asked that they'd love to have the recording. We'll definitely email that to you guys. And if you have any more questions, like, please send them my way. I'm happy to send them to Dr. Randa. And if you guys have any more advice you want to hear, I'm sure she's more than happy to answer a question here and there. And we'll definitely send this recording to you. And I will get to these texts very soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That was fun.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Have a great
Bye. See you soon.